The whisper in the dark. The air was thick with red dust. The machines never stopped. And the screams. Those never ended in the Korgath mines. Darren, a human mechanic, stood near the control panel, sweat on his brow. He had been working for 6 months on this alien planet. His job was simple. Keep the mining machines running. But nothing on Korgath was ever really simple. The mines were filled with alien slaves. Sold, traded, forgotten. They worked until their backs broke or their hearts. Gave up, no one cared. No one asked questions. But Darren wasn't like the others. One night, while checking the tunnels alone, Darren heard something strange. It wasn't metal grinding or rocks falling. It was soft, faint, a voice, barely a whisper. Please. He stopped. The tunnel ahead was dark. The lights flickered. He tightened his grip on his flashlight and moved forward, slowly. Hello? Darren called out. No answer. He took another step. The sound of chains rattling echoed in the shadows. Then, he saw her, an alien woman. Thin, her skin pale and dirty with strange blue markings across her arms. Her wrists were bound with heavy iron cuffs chained to the wall. Her head hung low. Her clothes were torn and soaked in sweat. She looked barely alive. Darren stepped closer. Can you hear me? Her eyes opened slightly, deep silver eyes, full of pain and fear. She didn't speak again, but tears slipped down her cheeks. Who did this to you? He whispered. Footsteps behind him made him turn around fast. It was Rugg, the chief mining guard, a cruel alien with thick armor and glowing red eyes. He smirked. You found the 1-credit slave. Worthless, isn't she? Rugg spat on the ground. Bought her last week. Can't talk, doesn't work, just stares at the wall. She'll be dead soon anyway. Darren felt his jaw tighten. She's chained. She needs help. She's property, Rugg growled. Fix your machines, human, not the slaves. Rugg walked off laughing. Darren looked back at the woman. Her eyes were still open, still watching him. But she didn't beg, didn't cry out. It was like she had already given up. He crouched down beside her. Can you understand me? A slow blink. He pulled out a small water pouch from his belt and held it to her lips. She hesitated, then drank quickly, like she hadn't tasted water. In days, Darren looked around. The cameras here were old. Most didn't work. That's why Rugg brought her here, to die in the dark, out of sight. What's your name? He asked gently. She said nothing, just placed her hand slowly over her chest. Darren nodded. I'm Darren. She tried to sit up, but the chain stopped her. Her wrists bled. Her knees were bruised. Darren felt sick to his stomach. How could someone be sold for just 1 credit? A single coin? He stood up and looked at the chains. Big, rusty, and old. Not even connected to the power lock system, just pure iron. Brutal and simple. He wanted to break them right then, but he knew the rules. Humans weren't allowed to touch slaves. Still, he couldn't just walk away. I'll come back, he whispered. I'll help you, I promise. She looked at him again, and this time a tear rolled down her cheek. Not from fear, from hope. That night, Darren couldn't sleep. In his small bunk near the machine room, he kept thinking about her face. Those silver eyes, that whisper, please. He got up and paced. What could he do? If he helped her, the mine bosses could throw him in jail. Or worse, kill him. But if he did nothing, she would die alone in the dark. He remembered Earth, his sister, his mother. What if it were one of them in that tunnel? He clenched his fists. No, more waiting. The next morning, Darren packed extra food and water into his toolkit. He pretended to go on a repair run. Instead, he returned to the dark tunnel. She was still there, still alive. Barely. When she saw him, her lips trembled. She blinked twice, like saying thank you without words. He knelt and gave her the food. She ate slowly, carefully, like every bite might disappear. He checked the chains again. He couldn't break them now, not yet, but he had tools and time. He would come back again, and again, until the day he could break those chains, and when he did, he would take her far away from this place. She was not just one credit. She was alive. She had a soul, and Darren had already made his choice. He was going to save her, no matter the cost. The next morning, Darren returned with a tighter grip on his toolkit and a heavier weight on his chest. He had not stopped thinking about her. The chained alien woman haunted him. Her silence, her silver eyes, the bruises around her thin wrists. He wasn't supposed to care. He was just a human mechanic here for a contract. But something deep inside him wouldn't let go. The mining tunnels were mostly empty now. It was shift change, the perfect time to go unnoticed. Darren made his way through the side path, careful to stay out of the camera angles. He had studied the blind spots the night before. He knew where to walk, where not to be seen. When he reached the dark corner where she had been, left, he paused. She was still there. But this time her head was lifted. Her eyes met his the moment he turned the light toward her. They didn't shine with pain like before. There was something new behind them. Something small. Something like fire. "Good, you're still alive," Darren whispered as he knelt beside her. He opened his toolkit, pulled out a small energy scanner, and carefully scanned the chains. No security chips. No alarm triggers. Just metal and rust. That made him frown. They hadn't even bothered to give her a proper lock. It meant they didn't expect her to live long enough to escape. He handed her a food bar and a small pack of water. She took them slowly, then paused. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came. Darren watched closely. "You trying to say something?" She nodded. It was the smallest motion, but it meant everything. "You remember your name?" he asked. She pressed her hand against her chest again. This time, she formed a shape with her fingers. 2 loops, a soft curve, then a dot. Alien sign language? He didn't understand it, but she kept repeating it. He took a deep breath. "Sira," he said softly. "That's your name, isn't it?" Her eyes widened just a little. Then she blinked once. Then twice. "That's a..." "Yes," he said, smiling for the first time. Her name. She had a name. She wasn't just a number, not a slave, not property. She was Sira. Darren looked at her wrists. The chains were digging deep now. If he waited too long, they might cut to the bone, but breaking them here would be loud. Risky. He pulled out a can of nano oil and gently sprayed it around the cuffs. She flinched at the first touch, but he hushed her softly. "I'm not going to hurt you, Sira. I just want to make it easier when the time comes." As the oil soaked into the metal, Darren leaned in. "I don't have the right tools here to cut these quietly, but I will. Tomorrow I'll come back with a plasma cutter. The quiet kind. We'll get out of here." She looked at him with a mix of fear and something else. Was it hope? He wasn't sure, but she nodded. And that was enough for now. Suddenly a sharp sound echoed from the tunnel entrance. Footsteps. Darren froze. Sira tensed too. A voice shouted, "Who's there?" "Rug." Darren quickly stood and wiped his hands on his shirt. He kicked the toolbox shut and turned around as the guard stomped closer. "What are you doing here again, mechanic?" Rug's red eyes narrowed. "Repair order." Darren lied. He held up a fake report he had printed. "Sensor failure in this tunnel. Supervisor. Wanted it checked." Rug grabbed the paper, read it slowly, and grunted. "You're lucky. I don't like humans poking around near our merchandise." "She's barely alive," Darren replied, voice flat. "She's not your problem," Rug growled, stepping between him and Sira. "Don't touch her again." Darren clenched his jaw. "Fine." He turned and walked away, heart pounding, fists tight. He had to stay calm. Couldn't show anger. Not yet. Behind him he heard a sound, a faint rattle. Then, the soft clang of metal against stone. He turned, slightly. Sira was watching him go. Her head tilted just a little, and even in the shadows he saw it. Her eyes weren't dead anymore. There was a spark. Darren didn't sleep that night. He spent hours modifying his plasma cutter to make it silent. He mapped every escape path from the tunnel to the outer ridge. He had one goal now, one mission. Sierra had been thrown away like trash, sold for a single credit, left to die in chains. But Darren had looked into her eyes, and what he saw there, what was growing stronger each time, was something he could not walk away from. He saw strength, he saw fire, and he would make sure that fire didn't go out, no matter the cost. Darren woke before sunrise, his mind racing and heart heavy. Every hour he waited was another hour Sierra spent chained to a cold wall in the mine. The image of her bruised wrists haunted him, and so did her eyes. Those silver eyes that had once been empty but now held the smallest flame of life. He couldn't let that flame die. The plasma cutter was ready. He had spent half the night modifying it, covering the core with dampeners and noise reduction gel. It wasn't perfect, but it would be quiet enough. Now he had to act. The air was still when Darren stepped into the tunnels again. The guards had rotated out an hour ago. Most of the staff were asleep or too tired to care what one human mechanic did with his tools. That was his only advantage. His steps were fast but careful as he reached the tunnel where Sierra was hidden. He stopped at the entrance and looked around. Nothing. Silence. Good. He moved toward her slowly, and her head lifted the moment she sensed him. Her eyes widened when she saw the cutter in his hand. He nodded once. "I'm getting you out of here," Darren whispered. Sierra didn't move, but her breathing quickened. She looked at the chains, then at him, and gave the smallest nod. He crouched beside her and examined the cuffs. The nano oil had softened the rust, just as he hoped. Io positioned the cutter against the first shackle and activated the silent blade. A soft blue glow lit the tunnel, slicing through the metal like warm butter. The only sound was a faint hiss. Halfway through the first shackle, Sierra flinched. Darren paused. "It's okay. Just a little longer." He finished the first cuff, then moved to the second. Her hands were trembling now. Whether from fear or hope, he couldn't tell. He worked faster. The second shackle cracked open. The chain clattered softly to the floor. Sierra's hands dropped to her lap, free, but she didn't move. Darren looked at her. "You can stand?" She hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, shakily, she placed her hands against the stone wall and pushed herself up. Her legs wobbled, weak from too many days without walking. Darren caught her before she fell. "I've got you," he said gently. He slung her arm around his shoulder. She leaned on him heavily, and together they moved through the dark tunnel. Every step echoed louder in Darren's mind. They were halfway to the maintenance vent when he heard it, the heavy thud of boots on metal. Voices. Someone was coming. Darren cursed under his breath and pulled Sierra into a side shaft, pressing them against the wall. He held her close, trying to quiet both their breathing. The guards passed by, grumbling about a faulty machine in Sector 6. They didn't see him. Didn't see her. Not this time. Darren waited until their footsteps faded, then looked down at Sierra. She looked up at him, scared, but still silent. Her grip on his arm tightened. They moved again, this time faster. They reached the narrow vent behind the power room. Darren opened the hatch and helped her crawl inside first, then followed and sealed it shut behind them. Inside, the vent was cold and cramped, but safe. They crawled for 10 minutes, then dropped into an old equipment bay that hadn't been used in years. Darren had been there before. It was forgotten, unguarded, and it had an access tunnel to the surface. He set Sierra down gently on a pile of cloth he had hidden there days ago. "You're safe. For now." She sat up slowly and looked around, confused. "We'll rest here tonight," he said. "In the morning, we'll move again." Sierra reached out, touched his hand, then drew a shape in the air. His name. Darren. He blinked, surprised. "You remember my name?" She nodded once, then she raised her hand again and pointed at herself, forming the same shape from before. "Sierra," he said softly. Her lips parted, just a little. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Still, her face said everything. He understood. She trusted him. Darren pulled a thin blanket from his pack and wrapped it around her. She was shivering but alive. She was no longer chained, no longer forgotten. But it wasn't over. They still had to escape the mine entirely. The forests beyond were dangerous. The company would send hunters if they found out she was missing. And helping a slave escape was a crime punishable by death. Darren knew that, but he didn't care. He looked at Sira, this alien woman sold for a single credit, beaten and silenced. Not anymore. Not while he still breathed. Helping her wasn't just a risk. It was the only choice he could live with. The air inside the old equipment room was thin and cold. Darren sat against the wall, staring at the hatch they had come through. Every tiny sound from the tunnels outside made his muscles tense. Beside him, wrapped in the old blanket, Sira was sleeping, but it was a broken kind of sleep. She trembled now and then as if her body still believed it was chained. Darren didn't close his eyes once. By morning, the mining base would notice she was missing. The other guards might not care, but Rugg? He would. He didn't lose things, and Darren knew. When the alarm rang, it wouldn't stop. He had to move her before then. Dawn came slowly to planet Korgath. The sky outside the mine was always red, always dusty, and the winds tore across the cliffs like knives. Darren waited until the vent's internal sensors dimmed. Shift change again. Their window was small. He turned to Sira and gently touched her arm. She woke fast, blinking. No panic this time, only readiness. "Can you walk a bit more?" Darren asked softly. Sira nodded. She pulled herself up, legs still shaking, but stronger than before. He helped her into the next passage, a tight shaft that stretched beneath the mine and led out toward the waste hills. It was dirty, abandoned, and full of rusted piping, but it was their way out. They crawled slowly. Darren led, flashlight in one hand, other hand reaching back to help Sira when the crawl space narrowed. She never spoke, not even a sound. But she didn't need to. Every breath she took was a small act of survival. Half an hour in, Darren spotted the glow of daylight through a broken vent screen. He pushed it aside. A rush of wind hit his face, filled with dust and cold. But to him it smelled like freedom. "This is it," he said, helping Sira through. "We're outside." They stepped onto hard red rock. The cliffs stretched wide around them, and far below, the desert rolled like an ocean of sand. Darren had scoped out a small camp hidden in a canyon, an old supply depot left behind by a failed dig team. If they could get there, they might survive. But the walk was not easy. Sira's legs gave out after only 20 minutes. Darren picked her up without a word, carrying her across the sharp stones. She was light, too light. Her bones felt like glass beneath her skin. Still, she didn't cry. She didn't complain. Her arms wrapped around his neck gently, holding on. They moved between broken cliffs, avoiding open paths. Drones patrolled the skies, but they didn't come this far out, yet. Darren knew the mine's security codes and tracking zones. He stayed low, quiet, and fast. By the time the sun was halfway overhead, they reached the canyon. The entrance was narrow and covered by hanging vines. Darren pulled them aside and helped Sira inside. The air was cooler, damp even. The depot sat beneath a rock ledge, hidden by age and nature. He had stored emergency rations, a med kit, and a heat blanket here. Now it would be their shelter. Sira sank to the ground slowly, leaning against the stone wall. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes scanned the canyon like a warrior. She knew this wasn't the end. Just a pause. Darren sat beside her and opened the med kit. "I'm going to clean those wounds," he said. She didn't flinch when he removed the dried blood from her wrists. She didn't look away when he wrapped the gauze. But she looked at him, deeply, and this time she raised a hand. She touched his shoulder, then slowly drew a circle on his chest. He frowned. What does that mean? She pointed at him, then touched her own heart. His eyes widened slightly. Was she saying, "Thank you"? Or was it something more? He didn't ask. He just nodded. But then, a sharp sound cracked through the canyon, the distant howl of a drone engine. Darren jumped up, scanning the sky. 1 dot, then 2. They had triggered the search. He knelt beside Sierra. "They're coming. We need to keep moving." She struggled to rise, but her body gave way. Darren cursed softly, then pulled the heat blanket around her and lifted her again. "I won't let them take you back," he said through gritted teeth. "They can kill me if they want, but they won't chain you again." The desert wind picked up and Darren began to run. Behind him, the drone engines grew louder. But ahead of him, just barely visible through the heat waves, was the edge of a shuttle wreck Darren had spotted days ago. If they could hide there, maybe they'd have one more chance. Maybe the girl who was once worth just 1 credit would finally be free. Darren stumbled down the rocky slope, his arms wrapped tightly around Sierra as he fought the biting wind. Every step was harder now. His legs were sore, his breath uneven, and the hum of the drones behind them was growing louder. He had escaped enemies before, but never with someone this fragile in his arms. Still, he refused to let go. The canyon finally gave way to a narrow ridge that overlooked a strange patch of green, an alien forest in the middle of a desert. The trees were tall, their thick, spiraled trunks shining with moisture. Large leaves moved with the wind, creating a rustling sound that drowned out all else. The forest was forbidden by the miners. Too many had gone in and never come back. But Darren had done his research. The miners feared the creatures in the forest. But the truth? The forest didn't kill, it just didn't allow cruelty. Even the drones didn't fly past the edge. Nature protected itself. It was their only chance. Sierra stirred weakly in his arms as Darren reached the forest's edge. Her eyes opened slightly, taking in the new colors. It was the first green she had seen in weeks. "We're close," he whispered, stepping past the first roots. Instantly, the sound of the drones faded. The leaves above shifted as if closing behind them. The air turned cooler, almost calm. The forest swallowed them gently. Darren didn't stop until he found a deep hollow under a large root bridge. It was dry and hidden. Carefully, he set Sierra down and pulled the heat blanket around her. Her skin was cold again and her breathing thin. "I need to find food," he said, more to himself than to her. He scanned the forest. There were glowing fruits hanging from branches, and thick moss covered the ground. He remembered reading that most of it was safe for humanoids, but not all. As he stood, Sierra reached out weakly and touched his wrist. He turned. She pointed to a blue vine hanging from a low branch nearby. Then, she drew a circle with her finger in the air and pointed to her mouth. "You know what's safe?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "All right. Stay here. I'll get what you need." He picked the vines she had pointed to, then returned and helped her chew the soft insides. Her body seemed to relax with the first bite. Her fingers stopped trembling. Color returned slowly to her pale face. Darren watched her in silence. She was recovering, not just in body, but in spirit. Later that night, while Sierra rested, Darren explored deeper into the forest. He found a small spring with clean water. He collected some in his pack and spotted strange paw prints along the edge. Something big lived here, but it hadn't come near them yet. Back at the shelter, Sierra was awake. She was sitting now, her back straight, her eyes alert. Darren gave her the water. She drank slowly, then looked up at him with something new in her gaze. Confidence. She touched her chest, then her lips. Her mouth opened. But still, no sound came. She pointed to the scar at her throat. Darren knelt beside her. "They took your voice, didn't they?" he asked gently. She nodded once. His jaw clenched. Anger burned inside him. not just because of what they did, but because of how calm she remained. "You're stronger than anyone I've met," he said. "Even without words, you're speaking louder than most people ever could." That night, Darren kept watch while Sierra slept. The forest sang softly, strange, peaceful music carried by the wind. And in the distance, something howled, but it didn't come closer. By morning, Sierra was already awake. She stood without help now. Her legs wobbled, but she didn't fall. Darren smiled. "You're getting better." She raised a hand, gestured toward the trees, and then drew a rising sun. "In the air, hope," he nodded. "Yes, it's a new start." But that hope was short-lived. A sharp beep from Darren's wrist comm pad alerted him. He checked it fast, movement detected outside the forest. Drones had circled back. They were scanning the canyon. "We have to move again," he said quickly. "They'll come looking for signs." Sierra didn't panic. She stepped forward, reached out and pointed in a direction deeper into the forest. "You know a path?" Darren asked. She blinked twice. Without another word, they walked, side by side. Not rescuer and rescued. Not slave and savior. Just two souls trying to outrun a cruel world. And for the first time, Sierra led the way. The forest thinned as they reached its edge, the trees giving way to sharp, cracked ground and old steel paths. A cold wind swept across the land. In the distance, half buried in the sand and shadow, stood the old border station, a forgotten outpost once used for trade, now empty. Or so people believed. Darren had learned of it from miners' drunken talk. Some said smugglers used it now. Others claimed it was haunted, but none dared go near. Darren didn't care about the stories. He just knew one thing. The station still had an old signal tower, and if he could power it, he could call for help. Real help. A human ship that wouldn't ask questions. He turned to Sierra. She looked tired again, but her posture was different now. Less broken, more steady. She had wrapped herself in leaves and cloth, shielding her body from the wind. Her eyes scanned the station without fear. "This is it," Darren said. "If the relay works, we can send a distress code. It'll take time, we'll need to defend it." Sierra nodded. She gripped the small tool knife Darren had given her. It wasn't a weapon, not really, but in her hand, it looked like a symbol. She wouldn't be captured again without a fight. They moved together, careful, quiet, stepping over twisted metal and broken tiles. Inside the station, the walls were rusted and cracked, but the control room was mostly intact. Dust covered the screens. Darren knelt by the terminal, brushing it clean. "Power cells are dead," he muttered. "I'll need to reroute from the storage batteries." He looked back at Sierra. "Watch the door, just in case." She stood tall beside the broken entrance, alert. Her silver eyes never blinked. As Darren connected wires and cleaned ports, he didn't hear the danger coming, but Sierra did. Her head snapped toward the outer corridor. She stepped back, raised the tool knife and hissed, loudly this time. Her first sound in days. Darren looked up and froze. 3 figures appeared in the doorway. Not miners, bounty hunters, leather suits, scarred faces, and stun rifles in hand. One was alien, thick-skinned with tusks. Another was human, thin and greedy-looking. The third wore a mask. "Well, well," the tusked one said, smiling. "We were told the girl might head this way." "She's worth more alive," said the masked one. "But if the human gets in the way—" Before he could finish, Darren jumped to his feet, holding a metal rod like a weapon. "She's under my protection," Darren said firmly. "Back off." The human hunter laughed. "You think one human with a stick scares us?" Sierra suddenly moved fast. She threw a fistful of forest dust into the tusked one's face, blinding him. Darren lunged forward and slammed the metal rod into the man's knee. He fell with a roar. The masked one fired. The stun bolt grazed Darren's shoulder, sending him stumbling. Sierra ran straight at the masked one, slashing with the tool knife. The hunter blocked her, knocking her down, but she twisted fast and kicked his leg, toppling him. Darren recovered, grabbed the stun rifle from the fallen human, and aimed it. "Leave now," he shouted, "or the next shot goes through your spine." The human raised his hands. All right, The other two groaned, still stunned and dizzy. Sierra stood beside Darren, chest heaving, blade still in hand. The bounty hunters backed away, dragging their wounded out of the station. Darren quickly shut the door behind them and sealed it with a welding tool. Then, silence. He turned to Sierra, heart pounding. "You saved my life," he whispered. She shook her head gently, then pointed. "At both of them. We saved each other." Darren got the relay working within the hour. Static buzzed through the room as the antenna powered up. He typed the emergency code. Human stranded. Civilian rescued. Urgent pickup. Life signs fading. He added coordinates and sent the signal. Now all they could do was wait. Sierra sat beside him, wrapping his burned shoulder with the last of their cloth. Her touch was soft, careful. He looked at her. "You fought better than most trained soldiers," he said, smiling. She gave a small nod. Then slowly, carefully, she mouthed a single word. "Free." It was barely sound. But it was real. Her voice was coming back. Darren felt a lump in his throat. "Yes," he said. "You're free now." The night came quickly, and with it, stars. Darren and Sierra sat under the broken roof staring at the sky. Somewhere out there a ship was coming, and when it landed, she would never wear chains again. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sky in orange and red. Wind swept across the broken station, carrying silence and dust. Darren stood on the rooftop, eyes locked on the horizon. He hadn't slept. Not after the fight, not after sending the distress signal. Every sound, every vibration in the earth made his heart race. Somewhere, a ship was coming. It had to. Below, Sierra sat near the old control desk, wrapped in a heat blanket, her hands resting quietly in her lap. Her wounds were healing, and though her voice was still weak, her silence was no longer empty. She no longer looked like a slave. She looked like someone becoming whole again. Then, he heard it. A distant hum. Low at first, then rising. Darren turned his eyes upward. A silver dot broke through the clouds, growing larger, sharper. The engines rumbled, smooth and deep, unlike the loud growl of the mining drones. This was a private transport, human-made, quick, quiet, clean. Sierra stood beside him now, her eyes locked on the ship. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her fingers slowly curled around the edge of his jacket. He glanced at her, then nodded. "They came," he said. The ship landed softly just beyond the ridge. Dust blew outward, covering the station in mist. The ramp lowered. From it stepped a woman in a clean black uniform, flanked by two med-techs. "Darren Reese?" she called. He raised a hand. "Here." Her eyes scanned the area, then fell on Sierra. Her voice dropped to a softer tone. "This is the one?" "She's the reason I called," Darren said. The med-techs moved forward, one of them scanning Sierra with a small handheld device. He frowned, then looked up. "Severely underfed. Scar tissue on vocal cords. No internal injuries. She's stable, but weak." "She was a slave," Darren said. "They chained her in the mines, sold her for a credit." The officer's face darkened. "Disgusting. We'll file a full report." Darren stepped closer. "No report, no noise, no questions, just get her out of here. Somewhere safe. Somewhere free." The officer looked at him carefully. "You're willing to give up your contract for this?" "I already did." She nodded slowly. "Then come with us. Both of you." As they walked toward the ship, Sierra paused and looked back at the ruins. The station, the dust, the sky that had once watched her suffer. She took a slow breath, then turned her back on it all. The ship lifted minutes later, its engines humming steady and calm. Inside, Darren sat beside Sierra in the medical bay. The techs checked her vitals, cleaned her cuts, and handed her clean water. She accepted everything without fear. Then came the question. "Do you have a name?" the officer asked her kindly, Sierra tilted her head, then looked at Darren. He smiled. She does. But it's hers to say. Sierra pressed a hand to her throat. A soft breath left her lips, then after a long pause she whispered, Sierra. The tech's eyes widened. Her voice. It's coming back, Darren said quietly. Little by little, they were taken to a human colony on the edge of Sector 9, a safe zone far from mining worlds and slave traders. The colony was simple, quiet, and peaceful. The people didn't ask questions. They saw Sierra and they saw Darren, and that was enough. Weeks passed. Sierra healed. She walked without pain. She smiled sometimes, even if it was small. She began using her voice again, just a few words at first. Darren helped her every step of the way. He found work fixing machines, and the locals quickly grew to like him. One evening, they sat together in the garden near their new home. The sky was blue here with white clouds, not like the red skies of Korgath. Darren handed her a small ID card. It's official now, he said. You're registered. You're free. No more chains. No more hiding. She took the card slowly. Her name was printed in clear letters, Sierra, and below it, her new status, civilian, resident, protected. She touched the card gently, then looked at him. You gave me this, she said, voice soft but steady. You earned it, he replied. She shook her head. No one ever saw me before you. Darren looked into her eyes. Then the others were blind. Sierra leaned forward, resting her head on his shoulder, and for the first time she let herself cry. Not from pain, but from peace. She had been sold for a credit, but to him she had been priceless. And now she had a home, a name, a life.